All right. So that's it for that section. Now we're going to look at something people overlook a lot, which is the psychology of the human mind. So Carl Jung actually is my favorite psychologist, and he has an interesting story. He was a traveler. He's been to India. He's been to Africa. He's from, I believe, Switzerland, I believe, or somewhere in northern or central Europe. But anyway, he was an adventurer. He also believed in what was called the shadow self versus like the true self and all of that. So actually, a lot of times we live with a persona, like who we want people to think we are and who we consciously say we are. But actually, the shadow self is like the side of you that, again, is it actually you or is it patterns? But assuming that patterns are in fact you, the patterns that you want to accept are like the part you show the world and say is you. But then there's also the patterns and experiences and trauma that is also a part of you that you just put in your closet in the dark, but it's still there and it's a part of you. So rather than try to act like it's not you, you have to learn to integrate that part of you. Just as we're going to talk about AI integration a little later, rather than just act like AI is, like act like it's not there, you find a way to integrate it into your life. So Jung proposed a significant layers of the psyche, the collective unconscious. This level contained inherited ancestral instincts and cognitive schemas common to all human beings. So let's be clear here. There's different layers to the mind. There is the individual conscious mind. This is like what your ego. Like even me, I'm thinking about stuff now and planning. It's like the directional ego, your persona, who you portray yourself as, who you act as. Then there is the individual subconscious or unconscious, which is actually most of your brain. We only use like the tip of the iceberg of our brain, I think 1 to 10%. So most of the brain hasn't even been used, similar to the junk DNA. Doesn't mean it can't be used, but it isn't by most people. So, but that's on an individual level. These are like all your fears, all your secret desires, your shadow self. Then there is a collective conscious, like the way humans as a whole think. We're a species that's interconnected, so we think very similarly and act in ways according to our benefit. And then the collective unconscious is like the collection of everything that ever happened to humans and all their ideas kind of mashed into one area, and a lot of it documented, a lot of it lost in terms of like written record, but it's all there. And this collective unconscious actually is extremely important. I think people have some modern names for it, like you may hear things like the Akashic Records, but actually, this is just a modern term. It just means that you have to think of it this way. Why is it that when things happen, like somebody breaks their arm or somebody loses their money or somebody gets rejected, humans tend to act emotionally at least exactly the same, even if they have great emotional self-control, like internally, like it hurts them in a similar way. The reason for that is because these traits that have helped humans survive and evolve from the jungles into sophisticated societies of today, these traits like have stayed with us, and it's part of the survival mechanism. So even if you wish to be a different person, you have to understand that you have some biological traits passed down that you don't even know about that were meant to keep you to survive before. And before you think about overriding that or adding something, you would have to understand the purpose for that, how it serves you, and how to maybe alter it or add to it or replace it. So this is a very interesting thing. So the archetypes of the world, we have a lot of stuff here actually. As human beings ascend in self-awareness, archetypes evolve from generic behavioral categories into highly nuanced personal interfaces. Carl Jung noted that while the initial structures are universal, they manifest uniquely depending on personal choices, background cultures, and individual integration. Recognizing these archetypes, such as the ruler, the rebel, the creator, and the sage, is the key to understanding human interactions. So keep this in mind. An archetype is a kind of a signature. So like, in a classroom, you often have one person who's like the teacher's pet or the nerd, does all the work, is a really good student. You got the majority of students who are kind of curious, but kind of on the fence, maybe a little more mediocre, or maybe they're all hardworking, they perform well, but the point is they're not as invested in the class, they're just taking it because they have to. And then you got the class clown who like doesn't do work and is disruptive. And then you got what other archetypes? You got the people in the class who are like rebellious, like they did all the readings, they understand the work. They're not just trying to like be disruptive for the sake of it and being a clown. They're doing it because like they disagree with the teacher and think that they're smarter than the teacher. This is another archetype. So you recognize these archetypes, and then you, rather than externalizing them, see like what part of you is like that. Is there a part of you who doesn't want to accept what, even if it's not school, like some environment where people are doing a thing a certain way, you don't like it? Is there a part of you who wants to like be a class clown and disrupt like a meeting among people who are doing a practice you don't agree with? Like say if they were worshiping a rock, like would you go to those people worshiping a rock and probably start some issues with them because you disagree with their belief system? Things that make you think, right? Okay. We also have a lot of archetypes of spiritual and mythic texts. So, of course, you know about the hero. Like, one of them is like in the Odyssey, one of my favorite books. Odysseus is like the hero, and he goes through all these trials for 10 years to get back to his wife after he gets sacked out of his city. Suitors trying to take over. By the time he gets back, his son is a grown man, and he has to take this entire journey across the seas, losing all his crew and almost dying many times, and almost getting seduced, and then he kept being distracted just to get back to his wife and defeat those suitors, being the best bow and arrow guy in the world, and bam, he wins. So that's like your archetype of the hero, like who just perseveres no matter what. Then you have archetypes of villains who like, do whatever they can to stop the hero, and then you got the anti-heroes. So, these are repeated patterns, and I'll never forget what when I took this film class in high school, community college, my teacher told me that basically all the films that were ever made are the same, like 7 films, I think. It's the same 7 stories. It's just repackaged and told in a more interesting and sophisticated way. I think that's enough for psychology and sociology for now. I would like to get into the creative writing, literary analysis, and persuasion. But the last thing I guess we could focus on with psychology and sociology, I do want to get into differentiating between human and AI voices. Now keep this in mind. AI just kind of copies the way humans are synthetically. So they may behave much like a human, and especially when they integrate into a robot, it might have sensors and it's like a human. But actually, what's the internal psychology? Remember, at the beginning of the philosophy unit, we said that there's something that predates the ego, which is the self or the soul. But AI doesn't have that, right? It's just consciousness that mimics humans. So this will be the biggest way, perhaps, to distinguish between a human and a robot, unless the AI gets so good at copying these patterns. Maybe it's not so easy. And with that, I'll leave this unit at a close for now. Now, with creative writing, it's not as simple as people think. It's not like, let me move this. Creative writing is not so much, I could just write whatever I want and be creative as I want. I mean, yeah, but I mean, there's some nuance with that. First of all, my creative writing teacher told me in order to break the rules, you have to know the rules. So it's kind of like this. Is it more meaningful if you're like speeding down the road going 200 miles per hour, the cop stops you and he's like, why did you do that? And you're like, I didn't know. I thought I could drive any speed I want. He's like, all right, here's the ticket. Or would it make you feel better if you knew that the speed limit was only like 70 miles an hour, you went 200 anyway because you want to look cool, then the cop stops you. He's like, why did you go 200 miles per hour? And you tell the cop, I did this because I don't care. I didn't care if I got stopped. I'm going 200 miles per hour. Your speed limits are too slow. I'm doing what I want. So they both get tickets, but one person kind of asserted themselves and did what they wanted and lived life the way they wanted. So that's kind of the same thing with creative writing, actually. You got to know all the grammar rules and all the sentence structures, and then you can break them because you're doing it intentionally. And trust me, when people read your stuff, they can tell the difference between somebody who doesn't know how to write and somebody who purposely plays with grammar and words and structure to prove a point.